Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to decode the world of Agile. How does something that starts with just one team's daily huddle end up running the entire engine of a huge company? That's what we're here to find out.
So think of this as a journey from the microscope to the telescope. We're going to start super small, looking at the absolute core of it all, the team. Then we'll tackle the real-world messes they have to deal with, check out some different ways to play the game, and then we're going to zoom all the way out to that big enterprise view.
All right, let's get started. First up, we're putting the team right under the microscope. Because, at the end of the day, this is the fundamental building block. It's the engine room of the whole operation.
Amazing software isn't just an accident. It's not magic. It's built by teams that are focused, that are empowered, and that have really, really clear roles. And when we're talking about Scrum, there are two roles in particular that are just absolutely crucial to making it all work.
So first up, you've got the Scrum Master. And you really got to think of this person less like a traditional manager and more like a guardian or a coach for the team. Their job isn't to tell people what to do. Nope, it's to clear the path. They remove roadblocks, they act as a shield against distractions from the outside, and basically, they create this bubble where the team can just focus on what they do best, building great stuff.
And right there with them is the business analyst. I like to call them the voice of clarity. They're the translator, right? The bridge between the business folks who have the big ideas and the technical team that actually has to build the thing. They turn those business needs into crystal clear requirements and designs, making sure everyone, and I mean everyone, knows exactly what they're supposed to be building. Without that, you're just asking for trouble. Okay, so you've got your dream team, right? The perfect roles, everyone's ready to go. But even then, reality hits. So let's talk about the daily grind, because this is where even the most perfect plans run smack into the messiness of the real world.
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice if building software was just a straight line from A to B? Of course, it never is. In the real world, teams are constantly fighting a two-front war against things that want to slow them down and wreck their quality. And those two things are technical debt and defects.
Now, technical debt is such a cool idea, mainly because it's not always a bad thing. Sometimes you choose to take on that debt. It's a strategic move, like taking a shortcut to hit a really important deadline. But just like a credit card, that debt collects interest. Every shortcut you take now makes things a little bit harder and slower in the future, until you finally pay it off by going back and cleaning up the code.
And this quote right here, it's the perfect example of that. We must ship now and deal with consequences later. See, that's not a team being sloppy. That's a smart, calculated risk. They're making a trade-off, saying, look, getting this out the door right now is so important that we're willing to accept the cleanup work we'll have to do down the road.
And this chart, this just breaks it down beautifully. It shows that not all tech debt is created equal. You've got the reckless kind, sure, where you're just not paying attention. But then you've got the prudent kind, that smart trade-off we just talked about. And there's also the kind that just happens. You learn a better way to do something after you've already built it. The key takeaway here is that you have to know what kind of debt you have before you can figure out how to deal with it.
So that's debt. The other big headache, of course, is defects, bugs. Plain and simple, it's when the software just doesn't work the way it's supposed to. And a huge principle in Agile is catching these things as early as you possibly can. Because let me tell you, a bug you find today is 100 times cheaper and easier to fix than one your customer finds 6 months from now. That's a nightmare.
So what do you do when a really nasty, high-priority bug pops up? You can't just throw all your plans out the window and stop the sprint, right? Chaos would break out. So there's a process. First, you figure out how bad it is, how many people it affects, and how critical the problem is. Then you isolate that work. A lot of teams use something called a swim lane on their board, which is like an express lane just for that bug fix, so it doesn't mess with everything else. And hey, if things get really bad and the bugs are piling up, sometimes you just have to call a timeout and dedicate a whole sprint to just cleaning house.
All this talk about process and different challenges, it really brings us to a super important point. Agile is not some rigid, religious text you have to follow to the letter. Not at all. It's more like a playbook. It's a collection of ideas and principles that you're supposed to adapt to your own situation. Because believe me, one size definitely does not fit all.
Take, for example, organizations that have a ton of regulations, or maybe they're just dipping their toes into Agile for the first time. They can't just flip a switch and go full Scrum. So they might use a hybrid model, something people call WaterScrumFall. It kind of gives you the best of both worlds. You get that heavy-duty, upfront planning from the old Waterfall method, but then you get the fast, iterative building cycles from Scrum in the middle. It's a fantastic bridge for companies that are making the change.
And then for teams that want maximum flexibility, there's Kanban. The big difference between Scrum and Kanban is really about the flow of work. Think of it this way. Scrum is a push system. You cram a bunch of work into a 2-week box, the sprint, and push it through. Kanban is a pull system. There are no sprints. As soon as a developer finishes a task, they're free, and they just pull the next most important thing off the top of the list. It's all about creating a smooth, continuous flow of work.
All right, so everything we've covered so far, it's great for one team, maybe 2 or 3. But what happens when you're a massive company? When you've got dozens, maybe hundreds of teams all trying to work on the same giant project? Well, this is where we need to put away the microscope and pull out the telescope. This is the question of scaling Agile, isn't it? How do you get hundreds, maybe thousands of people all rowing in the same direction? It's easy to steer a speedboat with 5 people, but trying to coordinate an entire fleet of aircraft carriers, that's a whole different ballgame. And to solve that problem, people have come up with some pretty sophisticated frameworks to handle all that complexity.
One of the go-to frameworks is called LESS, which, you guessed it, stands for Large Scale Scrum. What's cool about LESS is that it tries to stay as simple as possible. The idea is to take what works for one Scrum team and just scale it up, so all the teams share one single giant product backlog. And to keep from stepping on each other's toes, they have a meeting called a Scrum of Scrums, where a person from each team gets together to make sure everything is coordinated. But when you get to the really, really big players, we're talking giant banks, government agencies, huge aerospace companies, you often need something with a little more structure, a framework that's more prescriptive, something that can connect the dots from the developer writing a line of code all the way up to the CEO and the company's biggest strategic goals. And that framework is called SAFe, the Scaled Agile Framework. The core concept in SAFe is something called the Agile Release Train, or ART. Just picture it. It's a team of teams. It's this virtual organization of anywhere from 50 to over 125 people who are all synchronized, all working on the same cadence, chugging along together to deliver value.
What SAFe does is give you these different layers to keep the whole company in sync. It all starts at the bottom, with the team level. That's your foundation. Then, you group those teams into the agile release trains we just talked about. That's the program level. If you're building something truly enormous, you can coordinate multiple trains together at the value stream level. And then, at the very top, you have the portfolio level. This is what ties everything, all that work, directly to the company's big picture strategy and its budget. It connects the engine room to the bridge.
So there you have it. From a single team's daily huddle wrestling with bugs, all the way up to the massive strategic planning of an entire company using something like SAFe, these frameworks are basically maps. They're maps for navigating complexity, no matter how big you get. But it leaves you with one last thing to think about, a really important question. As things get bigger and more complex, is the real challenge about perfecting the process, or is it actually about getting all the people to work together?